Welcome to another episode of the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast. Sorry, it's been a few days since we were last here because Travis has been traveling internationally, and so have I. We will talk about that in a moment, but we're going to be talking General Motors and their plug-in hybrid strategy and their odd commentary on that, Polestar 4, Chevy Bolt, Acura's sales conundrum in the United States and why it's only going to get worse for a short while, Honda's Prelude, Volvo's EX60, the new 400-mile EV fast-charging thing in America, and Mercedes' fourth quarter end-of-year numbers, and why doesn't look good for affordable cars. Before we dive into our main topics today, let's cover a bit of the news that has happened since we were last together, because it has been just a little bit since you were in Europe, I was in Europe. I have a 7-month-old, so things are a little upside down.
Yep. I've got a cat. Same thing.
Yeah, sort of same sort of thing. I mean, the cat is a lot quieter though, and it's funny because my daughter has all of a sudden realized that the cat is a thing, and she wants to grab that cat so bad.
Right.
And the cat has figured out exactly how far, like to the millimeter, exactly how far she needs to be to keep the grabby hands away.
Well, because you want to stay close enough to the action, but obviously out of danger.
Yeah. And you got to tease a little bit, which I think is fantastic because it entertains her to no end.
Perfect.
Both of them, I think,
everyone wins.
Speaking of everybody winning here, in our last podcast, we were talking sales numbers, and we finally have Mercedes end of year and end of quarter sales numbers. But, I am surprised. Mercedes is being really cagey in not giving us exact sales totals for each individual model. They're grouping a lot of things together, which is interesting. But we know the big takeaways here, which I think go with what we were talking about last time, which was this rise in ultra luxury and luxury sales. Mercedes total numbers in North America were down 10%, but the luxury car side's actually up. It turns out the van side was the part that went down. But the key thing is AMG sales, and we all know how expensive those models can get, up 12%. Eye-wateringly expensive. AMG is up 12%. G-Class up 26%. And oh my God, those things are expensive.
That's a
Isn't that stunning?
That's a stupid rise. That's an insane number.
AMG's best year ever. AMG sold 145,000 vehicles globally last year. That's almost as big as all of Acura.
Yeah, that's
with a transaction price that Honda could only dream of.
I don't like that number. Let's move on to the next. That's crazy.
Here's another one. 1/3 of S classes were my box. So
that not only sort of checks out, but
not
again,
is that,
yeah,
it's like we've already got the $250,000 S class, and then 1/3 of them were whatever bonkos nutsy number you can get your Maybach up to.
Yeah. The only limitation is your dream.
So the bottom line there is big cars with big price tags are definitely big business. That's a lot of bigs there. But you know what's not so big? Acura's sales numbers. Did you see our post on Facebook about this? Because I was scratching my head. I had somehow forgotten that the RDX is sailing off into the sunset.
Yeah, I mean, so it's not just the sales numbers that are dwindling, but so are their models, at least for the moment. If you were going to do a massive shakeup and a retooling and a reimagining of something, pulling the RDX after the ADX is introduced is pivotal, right? Because then you would just have this huge gap in a segment that it is highly competitive. Lots of volume comes out of there, but that's a big one.
Yeah, and for everybody that doesn't know out there, so basically Acura's sales are predominantly MDX. That's the biggest model in their lineup sales-wise. RDX is a close second. About a full quarter of every Acura sold is an RDX. TLX is about 6%. ZDX is about 9%. So about 9% of all Acuras sold in 2025 were made by General Motors, but they stuck a fork in that one. That's done. TLX is done. RDX is done, but not because the market didn't want it, but because apparently there's a supplier issue for some critical component and or components. Acura will not tell us exactly what they are, but I am super curious about this. This is a big bummer for Acura and their dealer network, because whatever this thing or these things are, it's not easily replaceable. And Acura says that they're going to actually have to stop building RDXs for, wait for it, almost 2 years.
Is this something that is exclusive to the RDX, or do you think it's one of the a shared component within the Acura lineup, and they're saying, hey, I guess maybe the RDX is close to a revamp, and they said, we're going to cut it here because ADX isn't getting newer, right, and the MDX is where it's at. Obviously, you cannot afford to lose MDX, so yeah, that sort of feels like hands tied. What do you do?
Hmm. Yeah, they're not clear again on what exactly it is, but if I were to guess, I would assume it would be some sort of, computer circuit problem, like maybe part of the body control module in the vehicle, which is unique to the RDX. It could be infotainment related, although
Mhm.
I would have assumed if it was infotainment related, they could have grafted MDX's whatever in there. That's the part that I am surprised by, is that they didn't try some sort of temporary band-aid for just 2 years of sales, because I like the RDX. I honestly thought it could get away with another 3-year cycle by giving it a mild refresh. The infotainment from MDX, a little bit of a tweaky tweak to the style, maybe a new dashboard, call it good,
Mhm.
maybe give it a hybrid system at some point later. But instead, they're going to have to pause all sales for almost 2 calendar years. And if we do the math, if we delete those models from their 2025 sales, this would be the worst sales year in Acura's history since 1986, since they started.
Like I said, that ADX is going to be absolutely pivotal to the
Mhm,
brand for the moment. I'm not saying they can't have a really bad sales year and still survive.
mhm.
And if you have a clear, here's why and here's the fix, and some of it, let's just say some of it's out of their hands, at least to some extent. But that's it's a tough position to be in. You don't want
Yeah.
that for your brand, especially your flagship brand.
Mhm,
You don't want to be taking products away from there. Obviously, you're not going to sacrifice, let's say, if you can pull something out of a CRV and drop it in RDX, you can't really afford to cannibalize CRV sales either. But if you could
mhm.
pull a few and try and make that
Yeah.
work, then it's probably worth doing. But yeah,
I
a little bit
just don't
sucks.
see ADX satisfying RDX shoppers. I see some maybe going up to MDX, but they might think it's too big. We'll see how it goes. I think also this is a bit of a missed trajectory thing, but remember we have RSX coming up soon, their electric model. That's not
Mhm.
really going to move the needle a lot, even if it sells as well as ZDX. We're
Right.
talking not very many units. Um,
And that's still a big unknown in a
yeah,
lot of ways.
and MDX has an awkward trajectory. So this is kind of a pivotal moment. We'll see where Acura goes here in the next 2 years, but MDX is not having a good trajectory. They were up a little bit by the numbers over last year, previous year, 2024, I should say, but their general trajectory has been downward for the last 11 years. And what did surprise me is we now have complete numbers for the year. Lexus TX just absolutely blew past Acura. To be honest, am shocked how well TX is selling for Lexus. It is now the best-selling luxury three-row SUV in the United States, definitely hands down beating MDX. Um,
Mhm.
I had assumed actually more people would be willing to have the tighter back seat for the better driving dynamics in the
Mhm.
MDX. I also think the MDX is just prettier inside and out than the TX.
Yeah.
TX is a little basic.
Yeah.
Um, but the
Little
more
mini
concerning
manny.
thing, I think, is that Volvo undersold MDX with the XC90, the significantly more expensive XC90, I should say, in average
Mhm.
configurations by only about 1,000 units. And if you logically put together EX90 and EX90, or XC90 and EX90 together, that combo outsold MDX, and those two vehicles are very closely related. And of course, globally, MDX undersells XC90 by quite a lot because Acura doesn't sell models in every market that they sell Hondas in.
Yeah, I'm not going to say they're in big trouble, but they don't have. I mean, you and I agree. If we needed a mid-sized third row vehicle, we're not looking at a TDX. We'd go get an MDX. It's going to fit us. But is the market saying, "Oh yeah, we really prioritize driving dynamics"?
Mhm.
Maybe I don't mean to put it out there in a negative way, but maybe Acura needs a boat. Maybe they
Yeah.
need just a big people mover that isn't particularly exciting to drive. So what would be its catch? Well, it'd have to look good. It'd have to have
Mhm.
some level of performance to it, or certainly a hybrid option. But
That's
yeah,
that's
maybe,
the key, I think, to be honest, because Lexus
yeah.
TX, they're selling a lot of hybrid TXs. And when we look at Volvo sales, it's hybrid there too, because depending on the market we're talking about, Volvo sells about half or more than half of all XC90s as plug-in hybrids, depending on where we're talking. In
Yeah.
California, their largest market in the US, XC90 was generally running about half plug-in hybrid models. And that's something that Acura just doesn't have anymore. And it's always struck me as odd because the MDX used to have a hybrid and I actually quite liked it. That leads me actually to my next point here, which is, should that Honda Prelude you just drove, should it have been an Acura?
It's a little bit close, and there's already, this thought around something like the Integra, which is the Integra different enough, or should there be an SI anymore? Should they just make it the Acura Integra? Should it be the Integra hybrid? Because there's so many of these underpinnings already exist between the Civic and the Type R and the Integra and the Type S, right? There's a lot of these commonalities. I don't know if that's really the move, and if they're going to do it, I would love to see an Acura Integra, two-door that's built out of the Prelude. I think they could do that, where the Prelude isn't exactly a Civic coupe, right? It's close enough. So I think there's opportunity to do two different models there. I just don't know
Hmm.
what exactly you do to differentiate them. I can tell you there are some pieces missing in the Prelude, things like powered seats, things
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
adjustable lumbar support. There are these little things, a moonroof, right? There's a number of these things on an already expensive model.
If we go back in the Wayback Time, that RSX, because
Yeah,
they're calling the new EV an RSX. If we go back
right.
to the actual RSX once upon a time, it didn't have those things, as I recall. So in my brain,
Yeah.
Prelude would have made more sense as RSX in so many ways. They're not going
Mhm.
to build a lot of them because they don't think many people are going to buy them. They're only
Right.
projecting about 4,000 units in sales. And the
Yeah.
last SI coupe they sold about 3,850, something like that. So for everybody out there that's like, why is Prelude so limited? Well, the last time Honda sold a powerful coupe with, well, air quotes, powerful 200 horsepower coupe with a
Yeah.
manual, they sold less than 4,000. So there's your number. But
Right.
so I don't think there's enough there to support RSX and Prelude. I think it should just have all been Acura-ified. So they could have given it, maybe they could have given it power seats.
Maybe. So I'm a little bit torn there. I think if the Prelude does any sort of well, right, if they sell their 4,000 units without a whole lot of issue, and there seems to be more demand, I think you could do a dual branded option. So you have the Acura, call it the Integra Coupe or what, something like that, because the RSX name is taken. I think adopting the RSX badge would have been great, but already taken, so not available. But I don't know if it should have exclusively been an Acura. That's an interesting question.
Hmm.
I mean, it's it's
So
it's
how about the
it's
rest
like
of it?
when the NSX came over here, right? It was a Honda, now it's an Acura here in the
Mhm.
US. Yes, the Prelude could have been Prelude globally, and over here we call it the Acura RSX, something like that.
So how was the rest of the Prelude since you just got back from driving it?
I did, and all of the press leading up to it was fairly predictable, right? This is too expensive, this is underpowered. What, and then the larger question is, what is this? I think it was fantastic, and I don't mean to go bigger than it is. I don't want to speak hyperbole here, but what else can you get that'll get you over 40 miles per gallon and be genuinely fun to drive and interesting to look at, and the adaptive suspension that exists in this model as it's lined up is impactful. If you want to put it in sport mode, when you click it over, it feels like you have made a change. There are some vehicles you click it in sport and you go, what's the difference between normal? In this case, it's not just the throttle mapping, but the suspension tightens up and it delivers a totally different experience. So, is it a little bit? Is it too expensive? Yes, but it's a little bit too expensive for me. And the separation between it and a standard Civic hybrid, I think, is worthwhile,
Mhm.
but maybe a little bit too much. But
So
would I
how
pay for it? I think I
Yeah.
would.
How fast or slow was it? Because a lot of us had hoped, not not expected, mind you, for those that are
Yeah,
seeking clarification. We had
right.
hoped that it would be lighter than a Civic Hybrid,
And
substantially
it is
lighter,
not.
but it is not. So,
Basically the same.
so what were we seeing there?
So the testing we got was different even than some of the other journalists got, and that happens. We got 7.3 seconds fairly repeatedly. We were at some elevation, but I don't think elevation hits this quite the same way because the power is coming from electric motors, even though it's the electricity
Hmm.
is generated by. So I don't think that was it. There are a couple different shift modes. The big thing making its debut here is the Sport Plus Shift function, and that made it 1.3 seconds slower in the
Hmm.
1-1 run we were able to do. And you and I both knew that would happen. But I do think if you're driving, the mountain switchbacks, which they had a great road for us to drive, go ahead and put it in that mode because you're not doing 0 to 60 runs, and it really does feel a lot more engaging. It's not quite as good as the Ioniq 5N. That's okay.
Hmm.
It's not. It doesn't feel totally gimmicky. It is a little bit weird to hear the engine revving up, but then knowing it has nothing to do really with how you're driving. But if you're looking for, hey, I want this fun engagement, go for
Hmm.
it. I just would not leave it in Sport Plus Shift often. It'd be like, hey, I'm putting it in sport mode. I'm putting it in Sport Plus Shift. Then I would do it. I would turn it off the second I was done with my spirited driving because it's just slower and less efficient and a little bit silly. But it does have that. It does have that duality to it.
Yeah. I am, I have to admit, I am sad that Honda did not change the drivetrain at all. Honda's a very conservative engineering company. So, for folks out there that don't know, the Prelude uses exactly the same two motor hybrid system that every other hybrid Honda in America uses. It's also widely used outside of North America and a large number of models globally. But well, once upon a time, they had different versions of this particular hybrid system. Even in the US, we had the Insight, we had the Civic, we had the Clarity, the Accord hybrid, et cetera. We had a bunch of different models, different engines and motors, and mixed and matched and whatever. They've really consolidated the numbers here. And the game with the Prelude was to try and create a very low volume product. I mean, 4,000 units versus, I don't know, a quarter million CRVs a year. So
Yeah,
you can see the scale and problem with development here. So it's essentially to use as many components as possible that are common. That said, I am a little bit sad that they didn't take this opportunity to say, whip up an ADX hybrid for the Acura brand that could have been
mhm.
250 horsepower. Just, a 25% power bump, I think would have been very impactful here. But the reason that they didn't do this logically is they would have had to have redesigned either the gasoline engine side or, more logically, I think, they would have had to have redesigned the traction motor and the battery because they could have used the same generator and the same engine and really the same transmission case, most likely, but a higher power density battery that had better power dissipation characteristics and was just larger capacity, coupled with a 250 horsepower electric motor, I think would have made all the difference. And it would have really separated this from that, hey, it's just a Civic Coupe.
I think there is again, you get a bunch of journalists together talking about an old nameplate, some fun stuff comes up. The Prelude was never a performance car. It
No.
was a more interesting to drive daily
Hmm.
driver.
Yep.
And it always, my take on it is that it always brought forward new technology. It was a tech forward daily driver. So four-wheel steering and the super handling, all front wheel drive system. Those sorts of systems are of the tech forward. So now the tech forward in this case is the hybrid system. And what does hybrid performance kind of look like?
Hmm.
I think what's missing here really is a plug-in option. And it doesn't need to be a big plug-in battery. You're going to have to sacrifice space, but there already is sacrifice space. There's not nearly as much cargo volume as you get in the regular Civic. So make it a little bit less. Raise that floor a little bit. I
Hmm.
could fit my bags in there as I needed to. If you could get, even if you made it a 10 or 15-mile plug-in range, not big, not significant, as small of a battery as you kind of pancake into a spot, that way you can push more power. You can also boost
Hmm.
your efficiency a little bit. And because it's such a small volume model, you can do something a little bit weird because it's a parts bin car, but then use it as sort of a testing ground. That's my thought.
Yeah.
And I know it's not easy to just drop in, but if you could get 10 or 15 miles out of it, that's Honda saying, okay, what does the market do to this? Is this extra
Hmm.
performance worth the weight, just, the weight added to it? But, 0 to 60 times are going
Yeah.
to be just good.
And they
That's
could have,
that's the one thing I think would really be missing here.
yeah, and they could have used the battery from the CRV plug-in hybrid because one does technically exist in California, the
Mhm.
CRV hydrogen plug-in hybrid. So there
And
could have been some,
the
yeah.
Clarity's not that old. They could have cut that battery in half and swapped it in there of some sort, you know?
Yeah, I think the Clarity is too old. LFP technology especially has just moved so far beyond where lithium-ion batteries were at that time that, a cheap and cheerful LFP battery probably would have been the way to go. It could have packaged quite nicely in there, especially since plug-in hybrids would have reduced cooling demands.
Yeah.
This does take me along to our other news story here, which somehow really stuck in my craw this last week. I
Okay.
have a good friend that works for Inside EVs, and Inside EVs
Mhm.
in a number of places took something that Mary Barra from General Motors, their CEO,
Mhm.
said and just totally ran with it in ways that don't make a lot of sense and that didn't read between the lines. And again,
Okay.
I am actually good friends with some of the people here at Inside EV, so I'm not going to call out anybody by name, but, and this is a quote here, what we also know today with plug-in hybrids is that most people don't plug them in. So that's why we're trying to be very thoughtful about what we do from a hybrid and plug-in hybrid perspective. End
Mhm.
quote there. This caused a lot of EV publications to, trot out the old same tired lines that plug-in hybrids never get plugged in.
Mhm.
But I have a problem with this, and I don't know if you do too, but the problem I have with this is a few things. The first thing is it goes against General Motors' own public statements and their data in the past on Volt and Cadillac ELR. For the record, those are the only plug-in hybrids General Motors has had in any sort of recent memory. So it's not like
And
they've dabbled.
they were early to the game on that.
They were early to the game. They sold incredibly well for what they
Mhm.
were. They beat
Mhm.
everybody to that plug-in hybrid party in the US. Owners loved them. And according to GM's own data, the vast majority, and I mean like almost 90% in some subgroups there, were driving almost exclusively in electricity, to the point where a lot of EV proponents at the time said plug-in hybrids don't make sense because everybody always plugs them in, just buy an electric car. Why are you wasting the gasoline engine? And
Mhm.
now this has shifted to the opposite. So I see a lot of this upset about plug-in hybrids from the true believers that think they're this waste of money. And the logic they point to are these European tests and surveys that we've seen and talked about before, and them conflating that with America's realities. The reality that in Europe, there are massive tax subsidies and people have company cars there. In a lot of countries in Europe, most notably Germany, the majority of new cars are company cars, not privately owned vehicles. They're being provided to you by your employer who gets tax benefits for choosing a plug-in hybrid. You didn't get to choose it, so you didn't say, I want one and I have somewhere to plug it in. They said,
Right.
here's one. I don't care whether you can or want to plug it in. It also contradicts the only large scale survey set that we have in the United States on plug in hybrid behavior, done by survey by JD Power because manufacturers won't release all this data, that indicates that plug in hybrid drivers plug in their vehicle 5.5 days a week. So basically, all the
Yeah.
weekdays and maybe a little bit on the weekend. Lack of data is not data. And that is where all these inside EVs stories and other stories about plug in hybrids go. Lack of data is not data. Just because car companies aren't talking about this percentage of driving on whatever doesn't mean it's not happening, because the only data points we have in the US indicate that our market is very different than Europe. Again, company cars over there. You don't choose what you drive. Your employer did. Here, company cars are less than a fraction of 1%. So
Mhm.
you're buying your car, you're choosing your car as a car owner. And also, I find the conspiracy theory angle a little bit weird. Why is it that there's a conspiracy behind plug-in hybrid charging habits, and those same people are not demanding that Chevy release the Corvette files? How many times is a Corvette driven on a track? That's what I want to know. How many
Mhm.
times is a Tesla driven to a yoga studio? Why do we not have this information? Could it be instead that General Motors was left flat-footed because they bet all their money on electrification,
That's
full electrification,
crazy.
and the Ultium platform, and then they realized that Toyota is eating their hybrid pie because they're selling half their lineup as hybrids and a whole slew of decent plug-in hybrids as well, and GM's like, "Uh-oh, we're a little left behind." And lastly, Mary says plug-in hybrids are coming. So, If hybrids
So
and
why?
plug-in hybrids are coming and you're a true believer that they never get plugged in, holy shit, what's happening?
Right. Why would you
Why?
bother? Because it
Right.
doesn't matter, and it's an inconvenience to the people, and it adds cost that nobody's going to benefit from.
Hmm.
Um,
Or
yeah.
perhaps is Mary a good CEO and good at spin and spinning stuff to the shareholders that she needs to say as the CEO?
Um, I would venture to guess it's on the CEO, capability scale there, because you have to shift these things around. And we've talked about it before. Toyota, when they did not have a competitive or interesting EV, went, EVs are not the future. Hybrids are the future. Oh, did we just invest a ton of money in hybrid technology and we're the world leader and we're going to be the world leader beyond? Yes. So were we talking about hybrids? Totally. And then when an EV comes out, they go, you should look at our EVs. They're very good. Well, then why do you have them if hybrids
Hmm.
are the future? So, and I don't blame them necessarily, but it's a good point. We see these headlines all the time. People don't plug in their plug-in hybrids. But why do you have a plug-in hybrid if you don't plug it in?
Hmm.
That doesn't make sense.
Right.
And it's not just that you picked your car, you paid
Hmm.
the money for your car, you paid the extra for the plug-in hybrid. Why would you not get the advantages of it, which are not just
And
more
I
power in a lot of
and I
cases,
have
but
the answer for you, because
yeah.
if you ask my friends at Inside EVs, they will
Mhm.
then trot out the line that the consumer is uninformed. So, and that kind of offends me a tiny bit in a way too, because this is then
Okay.
implying that all car buyers are stupid. And hey, there are unquestionably some ill-informed new car buyers. But I have troubles believing that the majority of people on a dealer lot
Mhm.
making one of the most expensive purchases in their life
Yep.
doesn't at least casually ask, hey, this thing's got a plug. How does that work? I mean, it takes this willing leap from one thing to the absurd, or at least to the island of completely unproven for
Yeah.
that to connect.
I do think there are going to be differences in segments, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, a Toyota Prius plug-in owner is, I'm going to put good money on it, plugging that car in, because
Oh,
that's
yeah.
somebody who seems to be focused on efficiency and saving a buck, and that's something that is very good
Mhm.
at. The Jeep 4xe customer may be less rushed to go plug that vehicle in. I'd
That's a
put money on
tricky
that
one.
too.
That's a tricky one because Jeep did say, and they're one of the few companies that has publicly said how often their vehicles are charged. And they
Mhm.
also mirrored what JD Power was saying, is that the average Jeep 4xe owner plugged in approximately daily. And
Yeah, and,
again,
and and I get it, right?
we have that customer survey data there. And I know people will say, but that's not proof, because customers might say one thing on the survey and do something different.
For sure.
But again, the absence of data is not data. And that is the implication that we get there. Now, I will say that the later sales with 4xe, where in California it was hard to find a non 4xe
Non,
Wrangler, I'm
yeah.
willing to say that some group of that customer set is not plugging it in. Totally also willing to say that some of these AMG plug-in hybrids with 1 mile of
Yeah,
electric
yeah.
range,
Yep,
I would
yep.
never plug that in if I had one either.
Right, 6
Um,
miles ago, why bother?
Right. So, and actually, I think my memory is bad here, but one of the C63 is literally one
Mhm.
mile of EV range, I think is its EPA rating. So, yeah, nobody's going to plug that puppy in. But your average mid-level here, your RAV4 plug-in hybrids with over
Mhm.
40 miles of range, I'm pretty darn sure those are getting plugged in on a regular basis. Some portion of that buyer, yes, is attracted to the 300 horsepower,
Yeah.
and that's where I would say that the difference is probably going to split. The
You you
more
know you know
power.
the highest rate of plug-in? Probably that CRV hydrogen plug-in.
Probably. Probably. That decade-old Chevy Volt is probably getting plugged in all the time still too.
Yeah, yeah.
But I would bet that the more powerful the plug-in hybrid and the more power and performance focused that plug-in hybrid is, the less often it's gonna get plugged in. So, your Kias, your Hyundais, I'm betting those are plugged in all the time because
Mhm.
the extra power just compensates for the added weight. They're not a performance plug-in.
No.
Your RAV4s, it's definitely a little bit more of a performance plug-in. Your Volvos with 455 horsepower, probably still more. And then we get up to the AMGs with bonkers horsepower numbers and the M5. No one's plugging in those. Although the
You know,
M5 actually did do really well in EV mode. So,
well, and you could with those. The nice thing with those is you can just plug them in on a 110, just trickle charge it.
mhm,
You don't have to go buy this thing. Although again, those folks are not worried about the money, and they are
yeah.
probably more likely to go, "Oh, I bought my AMG. I want my AMG wall-mounted unit," which I don't blame them for that. Um, No, it puts it in an interesting point. There was one more piece of interesting EV news, and we try not to nail on Tesla all the time because there's always Tesla something. But did you hear that we're changing up some of the standard features, and no longer will auto steer be part of the included functions with your
Yeah.
Tesla?
And that I think the writing was on the wall because the base model had already excluded it. Then you would get it in some of the other trims, and now it's dead across the line. And if you are watching this episode after the middle of February, sorry to tell you, but you can no longer purchase full self-driving. It is going subscription only. So starting at $99 a month and ending God knows where, because Elon has already
Sure.
said pricing will go up over time,
Right.
that you want those extra features, including the lane centering, which that part did surprise me, since you can get lane centering standard on a Toyota Corolla. That
Yeah.
they're I think it makes sense though on a business front, business case. It makes sense that Toyota needs to push people to these subscription services. How long do you think your lane centering is going to work?
So I and I'm not again. I try not to be a person of hyperbole. If I lose a function on my vehicle, I am pursuing every legal course of action I can because I bought the product as is, as was advertised, and to
Hmm.
remove a function that I paid for,
Didn't your
I am going to have
ultrasonic
a
sensors already
serious
stop
problem
working?
with. I didn't have any.
Oh, you didn't have
So
any. Okay.
yeah, yeah. So and I hear you there, but the functionality, at least in theory, the functionality didn't go away because they said we're not using this, but you still will get notification, dings and alerts when you get too close to something. But they're doing it a different
Yeah.
fashion.
I would
So I
argue that the
I, I don't
functionality is
love that.
still left because it's
Yeah,
not as
yeah.
good.
No, no, no. I'm with you. I hear you. But if I bought a car, and for me, a true, genuine, like one of the reasons is because I put so many miles on my vehicle. I'm close to 20,000 miles a year just on my personal car. And so much of that is highway. And so much of that is the ease of, the sit back and shoulders down instead of all right here, hands down instead of hands up. That is one of the reasons I bought that car. And if you took that away, I would have a serious problem with it. And yeah, and I don't know if they can afford to do that because there is going to be an uproar, and they have sold a lot of vehicles
Mhm.
with this function.
Mhm.
But here's the key: what Tesla can do, what they do and can do, will do, is if I traded my vehicle into Tesla, I guarantee the auto steer function would disappear because
That's
they can do
yeah.
that.
They can, and that's the one of the things they haven't said is
Mm.
will Tesla resold vehicles, will they lose the feature? That's an
I
open question.
And I would put very good money on if I
Yeah.
sold it to Tesla because I'm buying a new Tesla, or Tesla buys it at auction or something. If Tesla
Uh-huh.
is reselling one of these vehicles, that function will disappear because the whole point of this is to push people towards subscriptions. And
Yeah.
especially on a used vehicle where they're already not making any money on them, besides some servicing, I don't really think that makes any money for them. It's not a traditional service schedule. Then they're 100% going to push to the subscription. But what if and I don't know what it looks like at the moment, but back when I worked at Tesla, if someone was trying to get access to the Tesla app, they had to come to Tesla and
Mhm.
get their car registered. So
Yep.
I sell it to you. You have to go to Tesla and say, "This is my new car. I want access to the app." So they do still touch that car in a way that no other
Mhm.
manufacturer really does. But I can't imagine it. I could see it happening, but I can't really imagine that I sold it to you and I say
Yeah.
it has this feature, and then you go to them and they take it away. That would be like a consumer nightmare.
Or here's another thought, not that I'm giving Tesla any good ideas, but, you could also start forking your software development or hitting pause buttons and
Mhm.
say, as part of our ongoing commitment to future software upgrades, blah, 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 the new feature set is X, Y, and Z, and that's just how it is on vehicles going forward. And you would have the choice of maybe not getting a software update and have your vehicle frozen in time and have
Yeah.
that feature as it worked then, but then you don't get all the new stuff. And that could then sort of, I guess, help roll
The
people along.
illusion
Who
of
knows?
choice.
Yeah, the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
Moving along though, the sort of Tesla thing that I'm driving this week is a Polestar 4, which
Mm,
you drove relatively recently. I
mhm,
drove in Spain,
mhm,
and it was a hot mess
mm.
because that thing was so underbaked. It was. Have you ever looked at a cupcake and you're like, that looks delicious, and then you bite into it and it's raw in the middle because the oven was too hot or something went wrong and it's just not right in the middle?
Are
That's
you
what the
saying
Polestar 4
that's your Pulsar 4 experience? Yeah.
that
How
was
is
the
it the
Polestar
second time
4 in
around?
Spain. It is a lot better, but I will say it makes me scratch my head that every Polestar that has existed so far has a vastly different personality.
Mhm, mhm.
It's like a
Kind of
schizophrenic car
cool,
company.
but not helpful. If you're like,
Right.
"Ooh, I have a Polestar 4, but now I have a family, so I'm gonna get a
Yeah.
Polestar 3." It is not the same.
Yeah, because and they're this is strangely unique. I mean, you go buy a BMW and they're all shades of BMW, right? I mean, the
Mhm,
front wheel drive vehicles don't drive like the rear wheel drive ones, but there's a smorgasbord front wheel drive BMWs, X1,
mhm,
X2, and the 2 Series Grand Coupe, etc. And then we got the smorgasbord of rear wheel drive ones, and 2 Series rear wheel drive coupe drives kind of like a 4 Series, which is not that far off of an 8 Series, and et cetera,
mhm.
et cetera, et cetera. Polestar 4, 3, 2, and 1, they're like 4 different cardinal directions. Like, wow, they're all off. Um, it's not that the Polestar 4 is bad in any way, but
No.
it also doesn't feel or look exactly like the rest of the Polestars inside, though.
My biggest issue with the Polestar 4 is I don't know who wants one because
Yeah,
it's not a sedan and it's not really a crossover. I
it is
think
not.
on its own, you put it in a pedestal and you go, "What do you think of this?" And I go, "I liked it." But who stumbles across it? Who is shopping for what and goes, "But I should drive a
Mhm.
Polestar 4 also." It just sits in such a weird space and it's not one that I think anyone is running towards. So
Yeah.
what are you shopping against? A Polestar 4?
It's like you want a Model S, but you can't afford one, and a
Yeah,
Model 3 feels too small. That's
sure.
kind of it.
But it's like a
Or
tall sedan. It's a weird
well,
kind
the
of shape.
body's tall, but it's not high off the ground. So, like
Right.
parking lot, the headstones in parking lots, small curbs, etc., the front end will grab onto them. So
Yeah.
be real careful. It is not high. Um, I think the customer is someone that went to the Tesla dealer, was stuck between these two worlds, Model 3, Model S, and thought to
Mhm.
themselves, you know what? These Teslas have one window too many.
Mm. Yeah, I can see a little bit too much real light through the rearview mirror.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
I think if I got a Polestar 4, I would have to wrap that cutout black so it
Black.
looked right.
You
But
know,
there's a
I will say
functional
that I like
problem.
I like the rear seats in the Polestar 4, which is
Oh,
a little
very
bit
comfy.
strange because it's not a big vehicle, and it has really like there's more attention to the rear seats than I would expect of a vehicle of that size. I've never bought a vehicle for the rear seat comfort specifically. I'm sure somebody
It's
has,
it's
but
because
if
you
you
don't live in
are,
China.
that's true. But if
And
you are,
that's where
even
Polestar
if you
4 was made for.
even if you live in China, wouldn't you probably look at a bigger vehicle to have more room in the back? That's
Not
kind of my thought.
necessarily, because remember, this is the land of stretched C classes and stretched 3 series and stretched
Sure.
S60s. Odd where everything needs a big back seat and a comfy thing because maybe you can afford your private driver, but your company's only doing this or that or whatever size-wise.
Right.
It's an interesting world that doesn't fit the American psyche.
Mhm.
Um, but no, it's such an odd grouping of things. It's definitely quick. It feels so much faster, and lighter than a Polestar 3 or Polestar 2.
Very dynamic.
It's
Yeah.
very, very video game-like. The steering
Mhm.
is numb as all get out and very quick. So, like, it's darty on the highway,
Mhm.
but it's oddly actually a little slower than Volvo's ZX30, which did surprise me a tiny tick. But the bigger thing with the Polestar 4 is that it has no rear window, which I think it should still have one. It proves to the American audience that cameras are not always the answer.
Mhm.
And it also doesn't have lumbar support standard in the front seats, which is a
Mm.
weird omission for something with its price tag.
Right, but I believe you can get that plus package on pretty much every configuration, right? So you
Hmm.
can have it.
Yes.
I
Yes.
actually almost appreciate that you can get sort of a stripped out version, because if you say, "Hey, I like this vehicle, I like some of the performance of it, but I don't want all the doodads," you can kind of get it without doodads, which I'm not sure there's a huge market for that, but there's somebody
Yeah.
out there.
And for 56,400 starting, not including destination, I think it needs these doodads standard because that is above average for a new car price in America. It's not like it's like a $30,000 Polestar or anything.
Right, right.
Leases for $599 a month currently, something like that. So I'm just torn as to who it's for. Listener, viewer, if you own or lease a Polestar 4, let us know why you did it down there because uh,
We don't think
this
it's
is
bad,
yeah,
but we want to know.
this is not a Polestar bashing thing. That just
No.
my brain aches every time I think about Polestar. We've talked about this before. Why do they exist? Why is it not just a Volvo? That is still a valid question. But I am seriously considering sometime mid this year when our Chevy Blazer EV lease is up. I'm thinking about a Polestar 3. So
Mhm.
this is not an anti-Polestar conversation since that's pretty high on the shopping list. Is it going to be Polestar 3? Is it going to be
But
EX60, which we need to talk about next? I don't know.
yeah,
We don't know the answers to these questions, but I have to say, Polestar 3, I love. It is big, it's comfy, it's quiet, it rides like a dream. Um, it's going to have an 800
fun
volt
to
electrical
drive.
architecture soon.
Oh my goodness.
We don't know whether it's going to lose any fun to drive in the 800 volt transition because it seems like it's going to be losing the torque vectoring rear axle, which is a weird one.
That would
But
that would that would be a loss. That would be a definite
yeah, that
loss.
would be a bummer. But also a bummer, Chevy's Bolt is only going to last 18 months. We now know the timeline.
Yeah, so they threw a literal block party and said the Bolt is back, and we said, "Ooh, okay, what are we doing?" And then the answer was, "Not a lot. We're just bringing it back." And it was like,
Hmm.
"Okay, cool. We like affordable EV options, and I think for a daily commuter car, the Bolt is fantastic, truly fantastic. It's a
Hmm.
hatchback. It's got space, vertical space, not as much width space. My
Yep.
my friend had one for years. I put tons of miles on them, and I went, "This is a great little car."
And it got a
But
little
again,
extra range. So, the
yep,
actual EPA number ended up better than
a little
thought.
bit more power, right? We swapped in some of the drivetrain components, but not massively overhauled the whole
Hmm.
concept. It still fits within that Bolt bubble.
Now, the question
Do
is, would you Bolt or would you get theoretically the even cheaper Leaf, which is coming and will undercut it by a bit?
Oh, it's a tough one. I guess I would come down to how different does that Leaf drive, because I enjoyed the Leaf. It
Mhm.
was quite comfortable, and it does feel, I think, more refined than the Bolt does. There is sort of a
It's got
economy
big
aspect
screens
built
too.
into the Bolt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like a hatchback. I like the practicality of it. Cheap Leaf, base Bolt. Darn, that's a tough one. But I might be leaning towards the Leaf. I might be leaning towards the Leaf.
Yeah. Now, my particular quandary is that the next vehicle we must talk about is Volvo's biggest news, honestly, in recent memory, and that is the
Mhm.
all-new EX60. Um,
Yeah.
and as I said, we the Chevy Blazer is leaving. I definitely need to sell the Grenadier because it just does not fit, even though I love it for reasons that are
I keep lowballing you, but you're holding strong. I don't
ah
know.
the Grenadier is simultaneously the worst thing I have ever driven as a brand new
Wouldn't it be
car.
nice if you kept it in the family? You can
But
come
it's
visit it
so
on
cool.
occasions. I mean, yeah.
I might need to keep it so I can leave it to my children. That's the thing. Um,
It is one of the coolest things in the world, but please
they
continue.
claim they claim it was designed to be this generational vehicle, you see. So clearly
No,
clearly what needs to happen.
but honestly, it could, because people are still handing down their
Yeah.
Defenders that you're just like you're zip tying together to keep running,
Yeah.
and you go, "Would you like a modern one?"
I
That's
need to buy
only
a
half modern.
I need to buy a sheep farm in Snowdonia, and then I can leave that and the Grenadier to my
Mhm,
children.
mhm.
And only it's not right hand drive, but whatever, details. Any
Whatever.
rate, probably ought to sail off into the sunset. And I keep thinking because I need the room in the back seat for child seats.
Yeah.
rear-facing child seats. And so Polestar 3 fits beautifully. Not quite as well as Blazer, because Blazer is enormous in the back.
Mhm.
But the Blazer sailing off into the sunset, it does not make sense to keep it. The lease cost is too high. It's had
No.
some weird GMisms here and there, and the lack of CarPlay rubs me the wrong way. But
Yeah.
that's that. So we have
Yeah.
EX60 and we have Polestar 3, two things from the Volvo Geely conglomerate crazy thing
Yeah.
that are strangely similar, yet also completely different, since it, by all appearances, will be a shared battery design, battery pack, no, but battery design, and likely shared electric motors between the updated 800-volt system in the Polestar 3 and the EX90, of course, too, and
Right.
the EX60, but EX60 is all special.
Yeah, I really like the EX60, and if I was in your shoes, that is a tough one. Actually, the deciding factor might be a torque factor and rear axle, truly, in that situation, because there is a lot of room in that EX60. There's not as much cargo volume, admittedly, but the people space,
Mhm.
very good, very attractive, just smooth, 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 but not in a bean
Mhm.
pod sort of way. It feels like an elegant look. You have your choice of rear wheel drive, all wheel drive, performance all wheel drive, up to 400 miles of driving range,
Mhm.
rated driving range. But the what most people come into is right around that 320 mark, with the all wheel drive with a little bit bigger battery. Quick charging, even if not, well, actually, it's very near top of the line, really. I guess the only thing you might not like is the screen layouts, and it's a little bit more. A lot of commenters said a lot more Tesla here than they would like. To me, it felt very Polestar, which that sort of makes sense. I like the EX60. I like it a lot.
Yeah, that, and the numbers are fantastic on this. So we should go over this. So there are going to be three different battery packs. They're all going to charge on a DC charger 10% to 80% in just 18 minutes. This is one of the fastest EVs as far as charging goes in the United States. And what's also shocking is that the 19.2 kilowatt onboard AC charger is going to be standard in every model. Now, if we compare this to the Tesla lineup, this is where I think things get interesting, because up until this point, we've seen a lot of Tesla fighters, Tesla beaters, et cetera, that match what Tesla's doing with a different vibe, or they
Mhm.
get close. But this is kind of a different game, because EX60 should have more cargo room than Model Y. It actually is a little bit better than XC60. Performance is relatively similar. We're
Mhm.
talking the shortest range one will be 310 miles of EPA range. The all-wheel drive one will get you 320 miles of EPA range. And the upcoming P12 model, which is going to be a year after the others go on sale, mind you, that will
Yeah.
give you 400 miles of range and a 0 to 60 of 3.8 seconds. But that charging thing, I think this is what is going to help people understand how this fits in. In 18 minutes, you'll get 280 miles of range recovered. So in
Yeah.
that
And if you only
18-minute
have a 10
window,
minute charge, it's 165 miles. It's
yeah, it's
rapid.
insane. So that's the thing. The big thing, I think, is that you 10% to 80% charge your Model 3 or Model Y, you get significantly less range, and it takes longer to do that. So this is a big shift. And I think, putting this in better perspective, here's how that stacks up. So you get 280 miles of range in under 20 minutes versus a Model Y Performance. It would take about an hour to get that same, because you would have to drive that battery all the way down to about 4 to 5% and charge it to completely full to get 280 miles of EPA range. That's the interesting twist there. There are just two problems that I see with that, though. The AC charging speed, which is also equally impressive, is going to necessitate a 100 amp circuit for your home, and
To
I'm
maximize it.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah, to make use of it. Otherwise, it's not going to be any faster than anybody else's, right?
Right.
So if you don't install a 100 amp EVSE, it's going to be the same as your Model Y. The other part, though, is that this will require a 400 kilowatt DC fast charge station to actually exercise that full speed, and those are really thin on the ground.
Yeah, 350 kilowatt is pretty easy to find these days.
Hmm.
Especially if you're going to a big charging block, you're going to have a couple of them at
Hmm.
350. 400, not
But
so much, and that's where it gets tough.
but most of those 350s are shared output. So of course,
Yeah.
if the dude next to you is charging their vehicle, then yours is going to be cut in half. And if you want to use the most reliable and best positioned charging network for interstate travel, which is Tesla's, it's going to be significantly slower because this is a 400 volt EV. And by all appearances, Volvo has not commented on this officially, and my emails have disappeared into the engineering black hole while we
Hmm.
await an answer from Sweden. But it appears that the charge rate on a 400 volt system is going to be about 120 kilowatts. So it's going to take a lot longer there.
Similar to what we saw over with the Korean brands, just a
Correct.
big drop off. And that, I mean, you want to talk about a ill-informed consumer, or whatever we call it. That's one of those charging complications that people don't need. They don't need to see this
Hmm.
number and then pull up to what they are told is a fast charger and not get anywhere near
Hmm.
it.
It does at least bode well for future proofing because it's going to
Mhm.
use the J3400 connector. It will
Yep.
have supercharger access from the get go, according to Volvo. And Tesla is finally rolling out more V4 charging stations, which will be able to charge this natively at that 300, 360, 380 kilowatt mark in order to get that 18-minute charge time. So I am curious to see how rapidly Tesla builds that out because Cybertruck sales have not exactly, lit up the barn, right?
Yeah.
And if the Cybertruck had been rolling off the line at, I mean, at least at 50 to 100,000 units a year, which I don't even think we're going to hit that in 2026,
Yeah.
then I think there would be more incentive to build that network out faster. But as it is, I don't think Tesla has a reason to really hit the accelerator pedal on V4.
No, I think the only reason to do that would be if the ever elusive cybercab suddenly was going to benefit from those, and they are testing now without drivers apparently, but still not around the
Mhm.
corner, I don't think.
Yeah, and by all appearances, from what the rumors that I have seen, is that we should expect the Cybercab to not use an 800 volt battery. It probably will just use similar battery tech to Model Y in order to keep costs low. But I don't know. And do we
I mean,
even think Cybercab is going to be real? So that's a whole different
right,
question.
it would make sense to go on the more affordable route, but then you
Hmm.
want the faster charging because it is going to be for a business use, and those time is money type of thing. But
Yeah, but you're not paying a human operator, so
right,
that's
right,
the
right,
question. Is the robot going to be fine hanging out there just doing that thing?
right. And who's going to
Yeah.
plug it in
Hmm.
if it needs to be plugged in? I mean, obviously, there's a
Hmm.
lot of talk about wireless charging, but I think all those models testing right now have a good old fashioned plug.
Yeah. So I don't know the one thing I will say about EX60 that bugs me a tiny bit is the
Mhm.
door handles and the fact that they're
Oh,
not
okay,
they're not a mechanical release from the outside. For a safety
right.
obsessed brand like Volvo, especially in the light of increasing interest from standards agencies around the world and of course
Hmm.
consumers suing companies about
Including
incidents,
China,
including
for
China, right? And
to
that,
be
that is
exact.
the one question. What is the solution for China? Because China appears that this is not going to fly there. Volvo
Yeah,
says,
there is already a mechanical mechanism for the inside, so it's a
correct.
two-stage door handle, so
My
that's helpful. But
7-month-old cannot open her own door.
yeah, yeah, not helpful from the outside.
Yeah, and if my 7-month-old burns in a hypothetical fire where she is
Mhm.
trapped in the vehicle, I would probably just leap on the car and just go with the whole thing. So
Sure.
um, that just seems logical in my brain. Very
Yeah, yeah.
morbid, but at any rate, but that's the problem, I think, in my brain. And Volvo says that they've addressed this, that it has a cross-linked backup electrical architecture that provides power there, even if the high voltage battery is missing, which is something that other car companies don't do. But yeah, and they've crash tested it, and they claim that in the crashes that they've done, even with the batteries affected, yada yada yada, everything still works. But you know
I
what
think
also works? A regular old door handle.
they actually just might be a victim of timing. Not to say
Hmm.
that electric is always the way to go, no matter what. It sounds like they said, "Hey, the world is going electric as far as these releases, so we want to make sure that we're not falling behind. That we're going to go ahead and make this step forward. And here's all our backups just in case." And then this car is already finalized, and then
Hmm.
you get some of these
Yeah.
regulators go, "Ooh, we're not doing that," and they go,
Yeah, but we knew,
"Oh,
I mean, we've known China's doing China for a while. The writing has been on the wall there for a long time, and the Chinese government doesn't generally trot out things like this and then go, "Oh, never mind."
Right.
So
Right.
the trajectory on one pedal driving and electronic door releases, I think, is pretty well sealed for China. We just don't know where that off ramp is exactly, but we know that it's coming. And of course, the mechanical door thing is set in stone for the Chinese market now. So that's the curiosity that I have. Is there
Yeah.
just a version that we haven't seen that does have physical handles, and we'll see that in China, and then if the US does something about this, then we'll also see it here.
Let's swap it over. Yeah.
But yeah,
So two questions for you. The first one is on the performance level. Is the performancy enough, or does it seem like they're leaving a little bit of wiggle room for something like Polestar to say, no, no, we're the performance brand?
Polestar probably will have some version that will be slightly better. I'd be willing to bet that it will continue being kind of what we've seen in the existing crosses here, where Polestar 3 is minorly more fun than an EX90, but the bigger thing is it has a higher top speed. It's not that we're going over 112 here anyway. But I am surprised that for the safety obsessed brand, it's logical though, mind you, that they have decided to have really quick vehicles. They have to compete with the Germans, right? But it is sometimes a little bit like head scratchy, like, how does that go with everything here?
Mhm.
Because limiting your top speed does nothing realistically for the
Right.
American market in terms of safety. Having a vehicle maybe that doesn't go 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds, maybe that would be safer. I don't know.
Well,
Than,
but that's what they did here. It's
yeah.
3.7. So they totally
But
3.8, made sure
I'm
that,
saying
that it's not
EX30 is
3.5.
like a 3.4 second car.
I know.
EX30 is wicked fast.
That's just a little the whole purpose there is to
Yeah.
be a rocket. Yeah.
Right. But the rest of it, I really am intrigued by this because this is a new platform for Volvo. And
Mhm.
Volvo, they're an odd company when they talk about platforms because EX90, they're saying it's a unique dedicated EV platform. Let me be blunt. It is not. It is a heavily modified XC90 platform.
Yeah.
So, it was designed for the battery trays, etc., but the crash structures and a lot of what's going on up front and in the back is actually quite similar to XC90. So it's
Yeah.
as much the same platform as an MDX and a Honda Pilot are related to one another because they absolutely are.
Mhm.
The new one, though, this new EX60,
Yeah. Spa
this
3.
really is a different twist here because the unibody has been significantly changed. There are probably some components and design themes that are similar in crash structures, etc. But it's a very different vehicle structurally, and they're going to be using bigger castings. They're going to be using structural battery packs that are
Mhm.
serviceable from the inside of the vehicle, as I recall, rather than the outside in the vehicle. So it's definitely an interesting shift. Their focus was efficiency, charging speed, and reducing the curb weight. It's not Model Y light, but for a
Yeah.
Volvo EV, it is really quite light.
So then my second question is EX60 or EX60 cross country?
That's an interesting one too. I would just go with a regular EX60. The cross country thing is good marketing, and some people love the style, but I don't see the need for it somehow
The real
necessarily. And
difference besides some of the styling, and I have to admit, it's a small one, but
yeah,
the little strip in the back that says cross country in the stainless steel, I went, ooh, that's good looking. Um, Besides
yeah.
some of
I mean,
the bits that make it less smooth, it really comes down to the suspension. And the suspension in this case is an air suspension where the all-wheel drive gets adaptive and then the rear-wheel drive gets a coil spring. So if you're going to go all-wheel
right.
drive, you could say, hey, really why you would look at a cross country besides some of the aesthetics really comes down to, do you want an air suspension? Do you want a little extra
And
lift if you need it?
yeah, and here I would say I want to drive them first because it depends on how it's tuned. If
Hmm.
the air suspension is tuned towards the comfortable side, then I might want the cross country instead of the regular one. But Volvo's ride typically has been on the softer side of the European segment, so certainly firmer than Lexus, but generally not as firm as some of the BMW and Mercedes lineup. Although X5 rides really nicely, it's very comfortable, cloudy like with that air suspension. So I think it's all going to come down to how it's tuned for me.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't think you'll need it, but like
Yeah,
how
wouldn't
big of a
need it.
difference is it? You don't need it for the ground clearance, not
No.
really. But if it is noticeably more comfortable or noticeably sportier, right? If you switch it into these different
Hmm.
modes, that might be worth a look.
Yeah, it. I'm curious to see if we will be able to sample the air suspension at the first drive for the EX60, or whether that's going to come later or not.
Yeah,
Details have been
I
really
think
sketchy.
the cross countries, I think, are not the first ones. We'll get
Right.
the EX60 all wheel drives. That'll be the first ones we really get to just put our
The
hands on.
320 and 310-mile range ones are the ones we're going to get first, and those range figures are going to drop down depending on the tires and the wheels that
Yeah,
you get. So that's
so
the
that's
high
the
end number.
optimistic side. Yeah.
Right. So it looks like it's going to be about a 30 mile or so difference between the different wheel and tire packages on those different trim levels, but
Basically 10
still
miles
pretty good.
per inch.
Yeah. Pretty
Yeah.
good top line numbers any way you slice it though for those models. But the P12, and there'll be the P10 will come initially. It's the all-wheel drive regular performance one. The
Mhm.
higher performance P12, that's going to be about a year delayed. So I'm pretty sure we won't sample that at the launch event. My curiosity is more like, are we going to see the P10 regular EX60 and the P10 cross country at the same time? Or will that be just sort of
I would
quietly snuck into the lineup later?
I would almost be surprised if we saw a P10 and the P6, the standard rear-wheel drive, at the same time. I know the P10 will be there for
Mhm.
sure. That's going to be the sweet spot for this model, cross country or otherwise. But I'm almost surprised they have a P6. I love that in the delineation, it's so many more numbers below, the P10 and the P12. It's half of the P12. Like, well, okay, it almost seems like it does it a bit disservice. Why not be a P8? Small things, but I appreciate that they have it because you can
Yeah.
get basically the same range. And if you don't actually need all-wheel drive, I'm not someone who needs all-wheel drive. I'm like, give me rear-wheel drive. Give me some fun to
Mhm.
drive vehicles out there where I don't need to have a second motor that I probably will never use.
I think the logical reason is, especially for Europe and China, two-wheel drive EVs sell relatively well. There is not always this need for only all-wheel drive all the time in a lot of world markets, and Volvo is a global car company, and the US is not by any stretch their biggest market, which is the continually the interesting twist with Volvo. And whenever I encounter people that ask, why does Volvo do this? Why don't they do that? That's
Mhm.
the first thing that I'll go back to is, well, remember that generally speaking, the luxury car company brands that we see in the US, Acura, Lexus, BMW, Mercedes, etc., the US is their largest market.
Yeah.
Europe is sometimes the largest market or sometimes second. That's not the case for Volvo. Volvo's largest market is Europe, and their second largest market is China. May actually be their largest market at some point in the future. And the US is the third largest market for Volvo. So, and Volvo hates it when I describe it in these terms because they're like, no, we absolutely design cars for North America, but really they don't. They design cars for Europe, for China, and then we get things that they think will work with America. But you'll notice in the lineup, there is no model that is uniquely American for the Volvo lineup like we do see theoretically at one point in time in some of the other car companies lineups. Acura is almost exclusively a North American brand. It's very very limited in terms of markets outside North America. Lexus only recently was even sold in its domestic market of Japan. And when we look at the German options, there had been SUVs in the past where initially they were like, maybe this is only going to be sold in the US, maybe it won't be sold in Europe, and they're made in the US. So you can tell by where they're building the
Where the focus
SUVs,
is at.
yeah, where the focus is at for BMW and Mercedes, at least initially when those models were cooked up and construction was designed from the beginning to be here in the United States. That's obviously where the focus was, and Volvo doesn't have quite that same calculus. Um, for better or worse, I personally like it because it helps them be a little bit different, and you get to see something that is not just focus grouped to death for
US
us,
centric. Yeah.
right? But at the same time, they keep some of the fun, wacky options away from us. Like, you could, depending on the year, you can get some really wacky colors, especially interior colors in some Volvos in Europe, and we never get that kind of fun here.
Well, there's, if you're ever in Sweden, there's a World of Volvo, setup. Unfortunately, I missed it, so at some point I had to go back. But my
Mhm.
first international trip, my favorite part was all of the other cars out there. I saw a lot of short wheelbase ID buzzes being used as your everyday, company cargo van.
Mhm.
Um, but it made me long, absolutely, for more hatchbacks and more wagons, especially there in Sweden. There are tons of them, many, many, many wearing those Volvo badges, but it was fun to see cars that I just literally cannot see here, or you don't
Mhm.
see in anywhere near the same quantity.
I just I am sad that we don't see any resurgence in the European brands. Before the Stellantis merger, PSA, the Peugeot alliance there with Citroën, they were talking about bringing DS to the United States, and DS used to be part of Citroën, and it had has subsequently been spun off into its own brand. It's a
Mhm.
very style forward French car thing. And that's what I think is intriguing about some of these brands that we don't get in the US is that the style of especially a DS is very different from what we see here. The rest of the brands, I would say by and large, tend to be very similar to what North Americans would accept. The average Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes, etc., even though they're models that are sold in Europe that we don't get here, they're not vastly different.
Right.
Volkswagens all kind of have a Volkswagen vibe. They're different
Yeah.
sizes, different shapes, but they all kind of look like a Volkswagen, right? Um, and a lot of the other brands under the Volkswagen envelope, Seat, Skoda, etc., they're all very similar. Cupra, I would love to see Volkswagen's Cupra brand come to the
Yeah.
United States. That would be kind of fun. That's the sub brand, if I'm remembering correctly, of Seat from Spain. It's the Spanish
Mm.
Volkswagen's performance sub brand. Any rate, Volkswagen's got a lot of things there. But DS is quirky and weird because nobody does weird and quirky like the French. And even the logo looks kind of wacky and fun,
Yeah.
but they've got some really weird interiors. If you ever have the chance to just wander through their online configurator, I would say go to France and just the French DS website because
Mhm.
the Irish market and not all the English speaking markets get the full lineup. Um, but they've got some wackadoodle things as far as dashboard layouts, weird geometrical dashboard
Yeah.
layouts with different button modules in different inconsistent places, and
Sure.
it is all kinds of crazy. Um, but that's I think what we're missing in the US is a little bit of crazy fun.
Yeah. I mean, we only get so much, and you have to be the world power in automobiles to demand all the attention, and we're losing some of that. So
Mhm.
we're just gonna have to catch up and start getting with the program.
And if everybody out there, if anybody out there, I should say, is planning on spending more than 2 weeks in Europe, you can actually sample some of the weirdness that is the French automobile. Because I still don't quite understand exactly why Citroën and Peugeot do this, but Citroën, Peugeot, and DS will lease you a short-term lease as a tourist. You have to be there for at
Okay.
least 2 months, sorry, at least 2 weeks, 15
Okay.
days, or up to 6 months. So you can do the short term 2 week
Okay.
or 6 month lease on a new car, and you get limited configurations, of course, the ones that they think
Right.
they can resell. But rates are supposedly competitive to rentals, unlimited mileage. You get a brand new car, lots of pickup and drop off locations around Europe. The only quirky part is you can't drive to the UK anymore because they're not part of the EU. So that's a
Yeah.
bummer. But the rest of Europe is your oyster. You can drive all over, wander around in your brand new Peugeot or DS and experience the wackiness that is the French car.
Did you sample that when you were overseas, or is that a maybe next time situation?
No, I've always wanted to do it, but I've never had the right timing to be able to do it because usually we're wandering to too many different places.
Yeah.
And this time the trip was just a little bit too short, and the way that it worked out, we had to take the train here and there, so it just didn't work out to do the
Yeah.
road trip. But I think I definitely need to do it before I die. Let's put it that way. It's
Sure.
definitely on the list.
Well, at least you know what you're doing next
Yeah.
time.
The
Maybe.
I will say though, French cars, they're just not as weird as they used to be. They don't have weird toggle switches for turn signals on the dashboard anymore. The turn
Too
signals
mainstream.
self-cancel, so when you turn the steering wheel, the turn signal turns off. Citroen, as far as I know, has no vehicles now where the airbag doesn't move. That was their thing for a long time, was the airbag didn't move when you turned the steering wheel. I always thought
Mhm.
that was quirky and cool, but sadly, even they have gone mainstream.
By the wayside.
Yeah. But the reason we don't see many of them in the US is, of course, that a French car with a 100 something horsepower, maybe 110 horsepower, three-cylinder engine, it's not going to go over well for a lot of Americans.
No, the closest we're gonna get to that is the new cute little Fiat that will make its way to a retirement community in your neighborhood.
Yeah, maybe. But why would you not just get a golf cart? I don't know.
Such a good question.
Yeah, who knows the answer to that question? But that and more will happen in our next episode. So we will see everybody next week. Be sure and sound off in the comment section. Hit us up, like, subscribe, share. You can rate us on Apple Podcasts. That really does help improve our reach scores on the Apple Podcasts. Submit your 5-star reviews there. And of course, write in. You can write us your questions. You can voice memo us your questions. hey@autobuyersguide.com, or give us a jingle at 669-842-1947. And you will appear in our next episode. See everybody
And
later.
thank you to everyone who has already done so. See you next time.